Right, so hello and welcome back to Books and Things, and today I'm going to be talking about some of my favourite Japanese literature. So this was actually a video that was requested a while back, and I thought that I would have a go at making it. I really love Japanese literature. I feel like it's something I talk about on and off on this channel. I haven't read like masses of it, but I've read quite a lot of Japanese literature in translation, which I really like. I especially went through a phase like a few years ago where I read a lot of Japanese literature in translation, which is kind of tailed off now, partly because I'm trying to buy less books and I don't have that many Japanese books on my shelves. But I do have a few, and I'm making a concerted effort to try and read like one Japanese fiction book a month this year if I can, because I do really enjoy Japanese fiction. So I have 11 Japanese books to talk to you about today. I have like a top 10 of my favourite Japanese books plus one like honourable mention, shall we say. So I thought I would just talk through some of the Japanese books that I have read and that I have loved. I'm also going to link down below a video I made, I think probably like 2 years ago now, called Let's Talk About Banana Yoshimoto. Banana Yoshimoto is my favourite Japanese author and one of my absolute favourite living authors. She is a really incredible writer and I just really adore her books. So I would highly recommend going and reading some of her books and watching that video as well. 4 of the books that I'm going to be talking about today are by her, and she's a really brilliant author. But if you want to hear more about the rest of her work, she has written a lot. I will link that video down below. Also, before I get into the books, I just want to apologise for my pronunciation. I really struggle pronouncing anything that I have never heard before. Even if I come across an English word that I'm not familiar with, I have extreme trouble pronouncing it because I just have like no ability to use phonetic pronunciation. Like if I look at letters, I can't actually work out how to sound them out. Like I've just got like a block in my brain for that. So even though I have looked up lots of these authors, I still really struggle to pronounce their names. So I have loosely ordered these from 10 to 1 of my favourite 10 Japanese novels, plus one honourable mention. So I will start off with the honourable mention, which is Norwegian Wood by Haruki Murakami. The version I read was translated by J. Rubin. Now, the reason why this is here as an honourable mention is because I think I really love Norwegian Wood, and this was one of the books, possibly the first Japanese novel that I read. And it was one of the books, along with Kitchen by Banana Yoshimoto, which will be spoken about later, that really got me into Japanese literature. So I feel like it deserves its place here. But I also have a slight love-hate relationship with Murakami, by which I mean it's mostly a hate relationship, but I love Norwegian Wood. I've read 3 of his books, Norwegian Wood, Colourless Tanizeki and His Year of Pilgrimage, and Kafka on the Shore. I really liked Norwegian Wood, and then I read 2 more of his books, and I really didn't like either of them. And I have a lot of problems with areas of Murakami. One, I think they're just a bit too weird for me, especially Kafka on the Shore. Like, what on earth is going on in that book? It's so weird. That's too much magic realism for me. I need like a tiny bit, and then if there's too much, I just can't handle it. It's just too weird for my reading taste. And also I have quite a lot of issues with the way Murakami presents women, or mostly just like the fact that most of the women in his books tend to be like sex objects. Yeah, I had a lot of issues with both Kafka on the Shore and Colourless Tanizeki and His Year of Pilgrimage, but I really loved Norwegian Wood when I first read it. But then also like the few things that I didn't love about Norwegian Wood, I noticed as being issues and things I didn't like in his other work as well. Specifically the fact like the main character sleeps with everybody, often when that doesn't seem to serve a narrative purpose, which I kind of went with in Norwegian Wood, but then I read some of his other books and I also had an issue with that there. But at the same time, I did love Norwegian Wood. I should explain what Norwegian Wood is about. Norwegian Wood follows the life of a young man. He's at university and he's kind of dealing with various issues, one of which is the fact that his best friend from secondary school killed himself when he was 17. And the book kind of follows this young man, our narrator, grieving for his friend, and also his relationship with his friend's girlfriend, who he sort of becomes friends with as well, and also his relationship with another particular woman. There are a lot of things I love about it. It's really beautiful and really tender, and there is some wonderful characterization and some wonderful characters and some beautiful writing, and I really loved it. The main character does like sleep with a lot of people, including some characters who you really feel that didn't really serve the purpose of the story. But like leaving that aside, there are many things about Norwegian Wood which are amazing. So yeah, mixed feelings on Murakami, but I did really love Norwegian Wood and it is a book I would recommend. And number 10, I have Convenient Soul Woman by Sayaka Murata, and this version that I have was translated by Ginny Tapley Takamori. I really like this book. This has gone around on BookTube quite a lot, and it's one of those books which I quite liked when I read it, and then my enjoyment of it and my love of it has increased since I've read it just by thinking about it. I think because it's one of those books that is a really, really interesting premise, but it's slightly oddly written because of the premise, and therefore like the thinking about it afterwards is almost like more rewarding than the reading experience. Convenience Store Woman is about a woman, she's in her late 30s, she works at a convenience store, which is like kind of a cross between a supermarket and a corner shop. Is it? I don't actually know. Something like that in Japan. And she really likes working there. She also is single, she doesn't have that many friends, but she's basically happy in her life because she likes the routine of working in the convenience store. She doesn't feel that she needs anything else. But all the people around her don't understand why she's working in this job, which as far as they see is a dead-end job, and she doesn't have a boyfriend, no sign of getting married, and they just don't understand that this for her is a perfectly ordinary life that she's happy to lead. And it's about like being unconventional and not fitting into what the rest of society thinks she should fit into. And it basically follows her life and what happens when she tries to like conform more to what society wants her to be and how it wants her to behave. It's a really strong novel, really, really interesting. The writing style is quite weird because the main character is quite weird, but I really love it and I think it's a really great read. At number 9, I have The Housekeeper and the Professor by Yoko Ogawa, translated by Stephen Snyder. This is a novel that I really love and one I would highly recommend, and Yoko Ogawa is a really, really brilliant writer who I like. There's another of her books in this list as well. And this book follows a woman who is a housekeeper and she goes to clean and work at a house where the man who lives there is a old retired maths professor, and due to a traumatic accident several years ago, he has memory problems. He basically can only remember things that occurred in the last 90 minutes. So he like attaches notes to his suit so that he can look down and see things. And it follows the relationship between this woman and this professor who she's trying to help, and he kind of forms a friendship with her and also with her young son who like comes and sits at the house and does his homework while his mum's working. It's a really powerful and moving story, just really, really lovely. There's also a lot about maths and baseball, which is kind of fun, especially the math stuff. And yeah, it's just a really lovely, touching, heartwarming book and one I would highly recommend. At number 8, I have Asleep by Banana Yoshimoto, translated by Michael Emmerich. This is a little collection of short stories by Banana Yoshimoto that I love. There's 3 kind of short stories slash mini novellas in here, which all are kind of focused around the theme of sleep and involve characters who are like sleeping way too much or not enough. So there are some magical realism elements into here as well, which is fun. I love Banana Yoshimoto a lot. Her writing style is beautiful and lovely and wonderful, and yeah, I would really recommend Asleep. I think this was the second Banana Yoshimoto book I read and a good place to start. At number 7, I have Life of a Counterfeiter by Yashu Unu, translated by Michael Emmerich. This is a Japanese classic, I guess, modern classic from the 1960s, and this is a little collection of short stories. Again, I think there's like 3 stories in here. This is one I read a year or 2 ago and really, really loved. I love Yashushi Anu's writing style, and I just really like the stories in here. They're really thought-provoking. I think my favourite one is the second story in this collection, which looks at a man looking back on like an early memory in his life and trying to like reassess and reevaluate to try and work out the significance of it. It's just really, really interesting, and the way this collection looks at like memory and the stories we tell ourselves about our lives is just really great. At number 6, I have another book by Yoko Ogawa, and this is Revenge. This is translated by Stephen Snyder again. This is a short story collection that is absolutely wonderful. It is more gory and violent than most short story collections I usually enjoy, and slightly more magic realist too. In general, I am a more realism person, but this is a wonderful short story collection all about like revenge and dark things. There's a lot of very different stories. Some are about murder, some are about love, some are about family, some are about grief, but they're all interconnected, which is something I love. So you'll be in one story and a character will pass by another character from another story, and then another character from another story will be reading in a paper or hearing about the murder of a character from another story. It's just really, really cleverly done, and yeah, definitely a short story collection I would recommend. At number 5, I have The Makioka Sisters by Junichiro Tanizaki, translated by Edward Seidensticker, and this is another Japanese classic from the 1940s, and this is one that I really, really love. It follows the lives of 4 sisters in 1930s and 1940s Japan. The sisters are all very, very different and want very different things from life. Some are much more traditional and some are much more kind of modern, some are much more kind of traditionally Japanese, some feel much more Western, and it's just a really like interesting family story. It is the longest longest book on this list by quite a long way, and one of the most in-depth. I would say it's also a novel that I think you would enjoy if you enjoy Russian classics or if you enjoy like 19th century literature, because it's all about sort of money and marriage and the relationships between these sisters. It's a really fantastic novel and one that I would highly recommend. And like I said, I think this is probably like the one that if you enjoy 19th century literature and like those books that I talk about on my channel, I think the Makioka sisters is the novel on this list that you will enjoy the most. It's really fantastic. Characterization is wonderful and one I would highly recommend. At number 4, I have The Lake by Banani Yoshimoto, translated by Michael Emmerich. This is a wonderful book by, like I said, one of my favourite authors. It follows the story of a young woman. Her mother has recently died and she's kind of coming to terms with that, and she sort of strikes up a friendship and later perhaps something more with the guy that lives opposite her. And she is a mural painter, that's what she does for a living, and the guy who lives opposite her has like quite a complicated past, and they kind of bond over shared grief and past. It's such a beautiful, wonderful book and one that I just love an awful lot. I would recommend it very much, like I would everything by Banani Yoshimoto. At number 3, I have Muz Ice Sandwich by Meiko Kawakami, translated by Louise Heel Kawai. This is a Japanese novella that I read earlier this year that I really love. This is one of my favourite books of this year so far. It's very short and it's really moving, and it tells the story of a young boy, I think it's sort of like maybe 12 or so, and he kind of has this crush, I suppose, this interest and this perhaps obsession with a woman who works in a local convenience store who he nicknames Muz Ice Sandwich. And people don't like Muz Ice Sandwich because she's different from other people, but he thinks she's really awesome. And it basically follows his like interest in her and also his relationship with his family. His grandmother is very ill, which he struggles with, and he strikes up a friendship with a girl who lives nearby him and who goes to his school. And this book is about bonding and grief and growing up, and it's just absolutely beautiful, really wonderful, definitely a novella I would recommend. Finally, at number 2 and number 1, I have more Banani Yoshimoto. At number 2, I have Goodbye Kazumi by Banani Yoshimoto, translated by Michael Emmerich. This is a wonderful book. I think I've said before that while the other Banani Yoshimoto I'm about to talk about is my favourite, I think this might be her best. This novel is absolutely brilliant. It follows 2 young women, our narrator and her cousin Zugumi, who is not a very nice person, but Zugumi has been like ill all of her life, and she's never been very well, and this book kind of follows the relationship between her and her cousin, and also with a young man that Zugumi falls in love with. And it basically just is an amazing character study of this girl who is not very nice, but also like draws people to her anyway, and it's about female friendship and love and growing up, and it's just absolutely amazing, and I cannot recommend it enough. But at number 1, I have Kitchen by Banani Yoshimoto, translated by Megan Backus, and this is one of my favourite things ever. This is a little short story collection slash a collection of a novella and a short story. I don't quite know how to describe it, but this is absolutely wonderful. This is the first book by Banani Yoshimoto that I read, and which was one of the things, along with Norwegian Wood, which prompted me to start reading a lot of Japanese literature. I read this for a book club a while ago when I was living in Bath, so yeah, many years ago now, before I was on BookTube, and just absolutely fell in love with it, and fell in love with her writing style and the way she talks about grief and food, basically, which are 2 very important themes in all of Banani Yoshimoto's books. Kitchen consists of 2 stories, Kitchen and Moonlight Shadow. Kitchen tells the story of a woman who, after the death of her grandmother, moves in with a friend of hers and his mother, who is transgender, and it basically looks at gender and grief and food. Our main character kind of works through her grief through her love of cooking, and this kind of bonds her to the guy that she moves in with, and it's just lovely. It's so beautiful and so lovely and so wonderful, and has some of like the most amazing moments and the most like amazing descriptions of food that I've ever encountered in literature, and it's just amazing, and yeah, I love it a lot. The second story, Moonlight Shadow, is also lovely and incredible, and it follows a young woman who has just lost her boyfriend of many years, and in the same car crash that her boyfriend died, her boyfriend's brother also lost his girlfriend. So she and her boyfriend's brother kind of bond over this grief together, and again, like Kitchen, this looks quite interestingly at gender. Her boyfriend's brother, after his girlfriend's death, starts dressing in his girlfriend's clothes because he finds this like a really helpful way to grieve for her and to remember her, and many people around him kind of judge him for this. And it looks at our main character kind of coming to terms with her grief and also sort of her growing friendship with her boyfriend's brother. It's just so moving and so powerful. Like, I love this little book a lot. The 2 stories in Kitchen are just amazing, and I cannot recommend it enough. So there we have it. Those are some of my absolute favourite Japanese pieces of literature. Please let me know down in the comments if you've read any of these, what you thought of them, and if you have any Japanese literature recommendations for me on the basis of what I like here. One thing I will say is that while I love Japanese fiction, I'm not the hugest fan of magic realism. I do like some of the magic realism that exists in Banana Yoshimoto's work, but if you have any realist Japanese fiction novels to recommend me, that would be especially appreciated because those tend to be my favourites. And I think that is all for now. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll be back very soon with another bookish video.